So the other thing that really stuck me, Roger, is this example of the the English units versus the the metric units.
Yeah.
And it's a brilliant example of actually teams working. And can you tell that story on I think there would be everyday stand-up meetings, there would be status updates, and yet there is miscommunication, and yet there is no clear communication between these teams, which led to a huge disaster.
Yeah.
So how come how do you really stop such I would say miscommunication, or lack of understanding of what one team is doing versus what the other team is doing? So talk to us about that story, its implications and the learnings.
Yeah, that was the Mars probes back in the 1990s. That's when NASA decided that they were going to start moving towards exploring Mars, and spent a lot of money, a lot of engineering on. And nobody in the past has ever been able to really routinely land something on the planet Mars. It's very difficult to do. And they came up with these probes, and they had teams working across the country. One team was dealing in metric units, and the other team was dealing in English units. And this is a good example that here's this probe is probably the most technically advanced piece of hardware ever built, and it worked. But its problem came from not from a difficult technical standpoint. It came from the most simple situation that could have been, something that was overlooked, and that was that one team was using metric and one team was using English units. And sometimes an engineer, or certainly a project manager on a team like that, has to understand that. I think it's a perfect example where engineers get the engineering right. They designed and built this probe, but they didn't get the communication and the professional skills right, and being able to communicate and work together as a team, like you mentioned. And what happened was the probe got to Mars, and they're getting ready to land. And the team back at, I believe it was JPL, was wondering, they're getting these weird readings, like we should be on the surface by now. And all of a sudden they lost communication. And then the management team was gathered afterwards and discovered that the flaw is that one team was using metric and one team was using English, and they overshot Mars, and the probe was never seen again, and there's $1 billion down the drain. And that goes back to our discussion earlier about your reputation. That up to that point, NASA had landed on the moon, people on the, 7 times we sent astronauts to the moon. We developed all this incredible hardware, and all of a sudden we make a mistake like that. I mean, that in the past, when we made a mistake, it was just some kind of incredible technical thing that most people, most of the taxpayers in America and the media people didn't really understand. They figure, well, it's so incredibly technical and difficult that, we'll give them a little bit of leeway on an accident like that. But when it comes to something as simple as a third or fourth grader should be able to understand the difference between metric and English units, you end up your customer base, your taxpayers, all of a sudden start to lose faith in your ability to do your job, and your reputation suffers. And I go into the case study. NASA became kind of a late night TV talk show joke for several years, and it took us years and really it's changing the entire NASA culture before we were able to change that.